They didn't even wait for the lawyer to speak. She will get nothing. Dad hated her. That's what my sister Karen said the moment I stepped into the room. No greeting, no eye contact, just that sharp, cutting sentence, loud enough for everyone to hear, like she wanted it to echo. I felt the words land in my chest like a punch. My grip on my son Eli's hand tightened. His small fingers curled back around mine, warm and trembling. I forced a smile down at him, thin and shaky, but he knew. He always knew. I hadn't even taken a seat yet, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome. I wasn't family. I was just a loose end they were here to snip clean. Karen sat at the head of the table, perfectly poised in a gray pantsuit, her dark hair scraped into that tight bun she always wore when she wanted to feel superior. Her lipstick was sharp red, classic Karen, war paint for a battle I didn't know I'd walked into. Then came the voice I dreaded even more. My Uncle Rick, Dad's older brother, let out a dry laugh. He leaned back in his chair, fingers laced behind his head, that smug smirk of his spreading like oil across his face. "Even her kid knows she's worthless," Rick muttered, nodding toward Eli like he wasn't even human. Eli lowered his eyes to the floor. My heart cracked a little deeper. Around the room, a few heads nodded. My cousins, old neighbors, family, friends I hadn't seen in years. People who'd long since picked sides, and I wasn't on theirs. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. The air was stale with the smell of dust, leather chairs, and whatever overly sweet perfume Karen had bathed in. I could feel my pulse in my ears, loud, hot, humiliating. I led Eli to the farthest chair at the end of the long mahogany table, away from the pack. The chair creaked when I sat. Eli climbed up beside me, his legs swinging above the floor, his hands folded in his lap like he was trying to disappear. Karen turned her head slowly toward me, and when our eyes met, she smiled. But there was no warmth in it, just pity soaked in poison. "You know this is pointless, right?" my sister Karen said, voice smooth and cold. "Dad rewrote the will, cut you out completely, said you were dead to him." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My tongue sat heavy in my mouth, useless. I just nodded slightly, like I understood. But inside, why did I even come? I thought maybe there'd be something. A note, a line, a sign he remembered me. Something to make it all make sense. Instead, I was back in the one place I promised myself I'd never return to, surrounded by people who made it clear they had already buried me, long before they buried him. And just as I was about to stand, to leave before they started carving up the estate like vultures, the door creaked open. Mr. Connors, my father's lawyer, entered the room, clutching a thick folder beneath his arm. He looked exactly the same, neatly pressed, tired eyes, and a face that gave nothing away. The room fell silent. Everyone sat up a little straighter. This was it. I braced myself for humiliation. I came expecting nothing, and I'd leave with exactly that. Or so I thought. Because what no one in that room knew, not Karen, not Rick, not even me, was that my son Eli had brought something with him, and with one sentence, he would unravel everything they thought they knew. "You forgot the video he recorded." It had been 8 years since I stepped foot in a room like this with my family. 8 years since I packed up a life they said I didn't deserve, took Eli, just 2 at the time, and left without looking back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because every conversation with my father, Charles, ended in silence or shouting. Because every family gathering felt like walking barefoot across glass while smiling for the camera. But now, I was back in a room that still smelled like cigar smoke and old anger. The irony? I didn't even know I was invited to the will reading. The envelope showed up 3 days after the funeral. No note, just the date, time, and address in Connor's formal script. For a moment, I wondered if it was a mistake. Maybe they meant to send it to Karen, or maybe it was just a cruel final joke. But Eli wanted to go. He looked at me with those wide, soft eyes, his voice quiet but certain. "We should go, Mom," he said. "Maybe there's something you need to hear." I don't know how a 10-year-old can carry that kind of wisdom, but he does. Sometimes I think he sees the world in ways most adults never learn to. So we came. I wore the plain black dress I hadn't touched since my mother's funeral, and he wore a little button-up that he picked himself. I braided his hair that morning with trembling hands, and he told me I looked beautiful. He didn't know I had barely slept, that I was terrified to face the people who'd treated me like a ghost for nearly a decade. I knew what they thought of me. Karen, the perfect daughter. She stayed. She helped. She took care of Dad. She made sure everyone saw her doing it, too. She told the story so many times it became gospel. Julia abandoned the family. Julia couldn't handle real life. Julia ran away. They never asked why I left. They didn't know, or didn't care, that Dad stopped speaking to me after I refused to stay in a marriage that was tearing me apart. That when I showed up on his porch with Eli in a suitcase, he shut the door without saying a word. That the one person who was supposed to protect me from the world had become another wall I had to break through. Uncle Rick didn't help. He was Dad's echo, always repeating the same bitter phrases. Family doesn't quit. Blood is loyalty. Don't come back crying. And Karen, she soaked it all up and turned it into a script she could weaponize. So I stopped trying. I built a quiet life for Eli and me. We didn't have much, but we had peace, and love, and laughter. Still, part of me held on to the smallest, most fragile hope, that maybe, in the end, Dad had seen something, regretted something, left something behind. Maybe that's why I opened the envelope, why I showed up. But now, sitting in that room surrounded by hard eyes and smug smiles, I felt foolish for hoping. Eli hadn't said a word since we sat down. He sat straight, hands in his lap, eyes scanning the room like he was studying each face. His calm unnerved me a little, like he was waiting for something. And then Mr. Connors cleared his throat and opened the folder. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to myself, "Just get through this. Don't let them see you break." But Eli? He was sitting on something bigger than grief, and before this was over, he'd prove he was the only one in the room truly listening to my father. Mr. Connors cleared his throat again, the way lawyers do when they want the room's attention without actually asking for it. He adjusted his glasses, flipped open the folder, and began reading the will like it was just another Tuesday. I barely heard the first few lines. Generic legal stuff, estate definitions, executor declarations. My mind was spinning, not with what he was saying, but with what I knew was coming. He wouldn't say my name. I was sure of it. Still, every time he paused to turn a page, I held my breath like maybe, just maybe, the next words would be different. Maybe he'd surprise me. But no. It was all the usual suspects. To my daughter, Karen, I leave the primary residence and all its contents. Karen's face didn't move, but I could feel her satisfaction like perfume wafting across the table. She glanced sideways at her husband, Neil, who gave her a smug little nod like they were already planning renovations. To my brother, Rick, the lake property and all remaining shares in the family business. Rick leaned back further in his chair, arms folded, chin high like a king, surveying his newly acquired kingdom. I watched him slide the cigar back between his teeth and bite down gently, like he'd already won something. To Paul, my nephew, the vintage car collection. Paul? The cousin who once locked me out of my own room at age 9 just to watch me cry? That Paul? I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my face from cracking. I could feel the tears gathering behind my eyes, hot and sharp, but I didn't let them fall. Still no mention of me, not even a footnote. Then came the line I'd been dreading. And as previously declared, my daughter Julia will not receive a portion of this estate. There it was. Simple. Final. Like a closing door. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Eli's fingers slipped into mine under the table. I hadn't even realized my hands were clenched in my lap. His touch brought me back, anchored me before I drifted too far. I could feel my heartbeat behind my eyes. My skin burned. And then came the whispers, low but intentional. Karen let out the softest scoff. "Told you," she muttered to Neil. Uncle Rick shook his head like it was all so predictable. "Takes a certain kind of person to walk away from her own father," he said louder than he needed to. The others, the cousins, the so-called family friends, didn't say much, but their silence was just as loud. I stared down at the wood grain on the table. The lines twisted and spiraled, almost hypnotic. It was easier to look at that than their faces. I could hear my own voice inside my head, flat and hollow. Why did I come? Why did I think he'd remember me? But then, Eli moved. He let go of my hand and sat up straighter. I felt the shift before I saw it. His voice cut through the tension like a tiny blade, soft but unshakable. "You forgot the video he recorded." The room froze. Karen blinked. Rick turned. Mr. Connors paused, pen still hovering over the page. I turned to Eli, confusion flooding my brain. "What video?" I asked, barely above a whisper. But Eli wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight ahead, steady, certain. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small white envelope slightly crumpled but sealed tight. My name was on the front, but underneath it was Dad's handwriting. For the lawyer, only if it gets ugly. I didn't understand it yet, but Eli did. And suddenly, for the first time all day, I felt the balance in the room shift. I stared at the envelope in my son Eli's hands like it was radioactive. He held it so calmly, like it wasn't the most dangerous object in the room. But my eyes were locked on the handwriting across the front. Sharp, all caps, unmistakable. My father's, for the lawyer, only if it gets ugly. Well, it had gotten ugly. I could barely find my voice. "Eli, where did you get that?" He looked up at me, his expression soft but steady. "Grandpa gave it to me a while ago. He told me to keep it safe." My heart stuttered. He gave it to you?" He nodded. "The day we visited him, just me and him, you were at work." I blinked hard, trying to pull memory into focus. I remembered that day. Eli had asked if he could go with my neighbor to drop off something at Dad's. It was the first time I'd let him go without me. I had no idea they even spoke. Now Mr. Connors reached across the table. "May I?" he asked gently, and Eli handed the envelope over without hesitation. The entire room leaned in. Karen was squinting like she couldn't make sense of it. Rick shifted in his seat, no longer slouched. For once, nobody had anything to say. The envelope made a quiet tearing sound as Connors opened it. Inside was a USB drive, small, black, ordinary. But my pulse kicked like it was a grenade. Connors furrowed his brow and pulled a note from the envelope, too. Another page in my father's handwriting. His eyes scanned it, and for the first time since he walked into the room, his composure cracked. Just slightly, but I saw it. He didn't speak right away. He just nodded slowly, like something unspoken had been confirmed. "Everyone," Connors said, his voice quieter now. "There is a video message from Charles Thomas, recorded before the final version of this will. It was sealed with instructions to be played only if this situation became contentious." His eyes flicked to Karen, then Rick. They both shifted in their chairs. Karen scoffed. "This is ridiculous. He didn't say anything about a video." Uncle Rick leaned forward, voice harder now. "We don't know what's even on that thing. Could be fake." Connors raised a hand. "It's time-stamped, authenticated. I recognize the handwriting and signature, and per his instructions, I'm legally bound to play it." He plugged the USB into a sleek black laptop sitting on the desk beside him. The screen flickered to life, the logo dissolving into a black frame with a single word: play. The air in the room changed. No one spoke, no one moved. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. I gripped the arms of my chair like they might keep me from floating off into some other world. My breathing was shallow, shaky. Why would Dad leave a video? Why to Eli? What could he possibly want to say now after everything? Eli didn't look nervous. He just sat still, eyes on the screen like he already knew what was coming. Karen looked pale now. Her lips were pressed into a tight line. Rick had stopped chewing his cigar. I wanted to run. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But mostly, I wanted to know. Connors hit the spacebar. The screen went black for half a second, then flickered, and suddenly there he was, my father, older, thinner, sitting at his desk, wearing that navy sweater I bought him for his last birthday, the one I didn't know he'd ever worn. His hands were folded, his expression not cold, just tired. He looked straight into the camera, and then he started to speak. I didn't breathe. Not when the screen lit up. Not when I saw his face. Not when I heard the first two words leave his mouth. "Hi, Julia." He looked older than I remembered. His skin had thinned. His once proud posture had softened. But it was still my father, Charles Thomas, sitting at that worn oak desk with the antique globe behind him, just like when we were kids. Only this time, his expression wasn't stern or distant. It was human. "If you're watching this," he continued, "I'm gone, and I'm guessing things didn't go well at the reading." His hands were clasped in front of him, fingers twitching slightly, a small, nervous habit I had too. "I didn't expect peace between you and the family. I know what they think of you. Hell, I know what I said about you." He looked down, swallowed, and I was wrong. My breath caught in my throat. My nails dug into the armrest of my chair. Eli glanced up at me, but I couldn't look away. I believed what Karen told me. I believed Rick. I believed that you left because you didn't care. I didn't ask questions. I didn't listen to you, not once. You tried, and I shut the door in your face, on you and Eli. I heard Karen shift in her chair, sharp and uncomfortable. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. Dad's voice cracked, just barely. "I thought being strong meant being proud, that if you walked away it was betrayal. But strength is showing up. It's protecting your child, and you did that. You did what I couldn't." His eyes glistened. My own vision blurred. I met Eli one day when he stopped by. Just the two of us. That kid, he didn't say much, but when I asked him about you, he just said, "My mom is the safest place in the world." My hand flew to my mouth. "I lost you, Julia. I see that now. I lost my daughter because I couldn't stop being right long enough to love you the way you needed. But I won't let my last act be pushing you away again." He cleared his throat and looked straight into the camera, steady. So I changed the will. There was a collective gasp in the room. Someone's chair creaked. Rick's, maybe. Karen muttered something under her breath, but I couldn't hear it. I could barely hear anything but the sound of my father's voice. "I've left the house to you and Eli. The savings, the retirement fund, it's yours, and a college trust for Eli. I know it doesn't fix what I broke, but I want you to have the peace I couldn't give you when I was alive." He paused, then leaned slightly closer to the camera. "And if they're angry, let them be angry. You earned this. You lived through all of it and never stopped being a mother. That's more than I ever managed." A lump formed in my throat so big I could barely breathe. "I'm proud of you. And I love you, Julia. Always did. I just didn't know how to show it." And then, just before the video faded to black, he added quietly, "Take care of my grandson. Tell him, thank you." The screen went dark. No music, no transition, just silence. Pure, still, holy silence. Around me, chairs squeaked, someone sniffed, but I didn't move. I sat there, hand over my mouth, tears slipping down my cheeks, feeling like something I didn't even know I was carrying had finally been lifted after all the years of noise, of blame, of exile, of silence. He heard me. He finally heard me. And in the quiet that followed, no one could take that away. No one spoke when the screen went black. Not Karen, not Rick, not the cousins or the family friends who once smiled politely while ignoring the weight I carried. Even Mr. Connors sat still, his hand frozen above the mouse, as if stopping the video had also stopped time. And maybe, in a way, it had. I don't know how long I sat there. My hand was still over my mouth. My cheeks were wet, but I hadn't noticed the tears falling until I felt Eli's hand slip into mine again. He wasn't crying. He just looked up at me with this small, knowing smile, like he'd been waiting the whole time for the truth to finally find a voice. I leaned down and kissed the top of his head. My heart ached with something too big for words. Love, relief, grief, all knotted together. Across the room, Karen stood abruptly. Her chair screeched against the floor. She picked up her bag with shaking hands and walked out without a word. Her husband trailed behind, red in the face, mumbling something under his breath. Rick stayed seated longer, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on nothing. When he finally stood, he looked at Connors like he wanted to argue. But even he knew there was nothing to fight. My father had spoken. His truth was now unignorable. The others followed, one by one. Some couldn't meet my eyes. A few offered quiet nods, Pity or maybe respect. I couldn't tell. Soon, it was just the three of us left. Connors gently closed the folder and cleared his throat. "There will be some paperwork," he said, voice softer than before. "But everything's in order." I nodded. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? He gave a small smile, genuine, and left us alone in the room. The silence that followed wasn't the same kind I had grown used to. This silence was peaceful, whole, like something had finally settled into place. I looked at Eli, still holding my hand, still looking at me like I was the strongest person in the world, and maybe, in his eyes, I was. But he was the one who saved me, who carried that envelope like it was just a piece of paper, not the truth that would rewrite everything. We stayed a little longer. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed time to breathe. Maybe I wanted to sit in the one room where, for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. I kept hearing Dad's voice in my head. "I'm proud of you." 3 words I thought I'd never hear, words I needed more than I ever admitted. I thought about everything I'd carried, years of silence, of being blamed, of being erased, and now I wasn't erased. I was seen, heard, remembered. I looked at Eli again. "Thank you," I whispered. He tilted his head. "For what?" "For being braver than me," I said, "for holding on to something that mattered." He smiled. "I just wanted you to hear him." And I had. Not just in the video, but in the shift that came after, in the peace that filled the room once everyone else had left. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't always come when you want it, but when it does, it changes everything. So, no, I didn't walk out of that room broken. I walked out holding my son's hand with my father's words still echoing in my chest. I walked out whole. And that silence finally meant something. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been pushed aside, misjudged, or made to feel like your voice didn't matter, just know this: you are not invisible. And sometimes the truth takes time, but it will come to light. If you felt something while listening, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Stories like this only reach the people who need them most when you help them travel. And if you want more real, raw, and emotional stories just like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to tell. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, your voice matters. I will never forget the sound of the wrapping paper tearing. It was the only thing anyone could hear. No music, no laughter, just that quiet crinkle as my daughter, Kaya, carefully unwrapped her gift, her tiny fingers tugging at the corners like it was the most precious thing in the world. And for a second, she actually smiled, that soft, hopeful kind of smile kids get when they think magic might still be real. But when she opened the box, her whole face shifted. Confusion first, then a flicker of something deeper, hurt maybe. Her little shoulders stiffened and she glanced at me. The box was empty. I saw it before she even said a word, just a plain cardboard bottom. No tissue paper, no toy, not even a note. Just nothing. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it a mistake? Did something fall out? Maybe someone forgot to pack it? But before I could open my mouth, I heard him, my father, Frank. He let out this sharp laugh, short and cold like a bark in winter. He sat back in his armchair, folded his arms, and said, "Kids like her shouldn't expect anything. World's got enough leeches already." My heart dropped. Kaya froze. Her hands were still in the box, like maybe she just hadn't seen the gift yet, like maybe it was hiding under the flaps or tucked in the corner. But there was nothing. I felt the heat rush up my chest. My hands trembled where they rested on my lap. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat like splinters. Then Sandra, my sister, snorted and muttered, "She's just like her mother, always expecting handouts. Worthless." My jaw clenched. I could feel the muscles in my face tightening, the burn behind my eyes threatening to spill over. I forced myself to look at Kaya. She wasn't crying, not yet. But her lips were pressed tight, and her chin was trembling the way it does right before it breaks. Her eyes, those big, soft eyes, were filling with tears she was too proud to let fall. She looked at me again, not asking for help, just checking if she should pretend it didn't hurt. And in that moment, I hated myself. I hated that I'd brought her here, that I'd hoped, maybe stupidly, for a normal Christmas, that I thought my father could be different, that I wanted them to see the beautiful, kind, creative girl Kaya was and love her like I did. But they didn't see her. To them, she was just an extension of me, a reminder of my divorce, my failure, the mess I'd made of my life according to them. The room was dead silent except for the soft hum of the heater and the ticking of the grandfather clock behind Frank's chair. Each second sounded louder than the last, like it was counting down to a moment I wasn't ready for. Kaya looked down at the empty box again. Her fingers brushed the edge, then slowly she folded the flaps shut. Her hands were shaking now, and then she whispered something. "I got you a gift too, Grandpa." Everyone turned. Frank looked up, that smug grin still on his face. "Oh yeah," he said, half laughing. "This'll be good." But Kaya didn't back down. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a small piece of paper, folded with such care it made my chest ache. She took a step forward and held it out to him with both hands, and right then I knew this moment wasn't over. Something was coming, something none of us were ready for. I hadn't been home for Christmas in over 2 years, not since the divorce, not since the shame, not since everything I'd been trying to hold together finally cracked wide open. Kaya. She wanted to see them. She asked me 3 weeks before Christmas, "Mom, do I have a grandpa?" That was her way of asking why we were always alone during the holidays, why we didn't have matching pajamas or giant trees or cousins to run around with. So I said yes, and when she asked if we could visit him this year, I said yes again, against my better judgment. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought time would have softened them. Maybe I believed just for a moment that when they saw Kaya, when they really looked at her, they'd feel something. Warmth, regret, love. Anything. Instead, the minute we pulled into the driveway, I felt that old weight settle back onto my shoulders. That invisible tension that coils around your ribs like barbed wire when you're trying to smile for people who don't really want you there. Their house hadn't changed. Still cold, still perfect, still spotless, in that way that feels less like home and more like a museum. My mother greeted us with that plastic politeness she'd mastered over the years. A quick hug for me, a soft pat on the head for Kaya. Her eyes lingered too long on the scuff marks on Kaya's boots. I saw it, how she took her in like an item on a shelf, deciding whether or not she belonged. Sandra barely looked up from her phone when we walked in. She offered Kaya a half-hearted "hey," then went right back to scrolling. I could already feel my stomach tightening. And then there was Frank, my father. He was in his usual chair by the fireplace, whiskey glass in one hand, TV remote in the other. Didn't even stand up, just gave a nod and muttered, "Didn't think you'd actually show up." That was his way of saying hello. Kaya gave him a shy wave, her mittened fingers poking through the wool. "Hi, Grandpa," she said softly, like she was testing the word out loud for the first time. He grunted. I don't know why I still hoped for more. Maybe because Kaya was trying so hard. She'd made little drawings for everyone, carefully colored, folded, and tucked into envelopes with their names on the front. She even asked me how to spell "to my Aunt Sandra" because she wanted it to be perfect. She worked on them every night for a week. I wanted this to be special for her. I wanted her to feel like she had a family, even if they were far from perfect. I scraped together what I could from tips and extra shifts just to buy her one nice outfit, a little gift to open, and enough gas to get us there. That morning, as I tied her scarf, she looked up at me and said, "Do you think they'll like my drawings?" And I said, "Sweetheart, they're going to love them." But in the pit of my stomach, I already knew the truth. I was bringing her into a house where kindness was currency they never gave out for free, where smiles were measured and love had conditions. Still, I tried. I told myself this was about Kaya, not me, that I could keep my chin up, play nice, pretend for one day that everything was okay. But as I watched her heart quietly break in front of them over something as cruel as an empty gift box, I realized they hadn't changed, and I wasn't sure they ever would. Kaya handed out her little envelopes like they were treasures. She moved through the room so gently, like she was afraid to disturb anything. Each envelope had a name on the front, written in her careful, blocky handwriting. She gave one to my mother first, then Sandra, then even my brother Matt, who'd barely spoken a word since we walked in. When she got to Frank, she paused for just a second, long enough that I held my breath. But she smiled, lifted the envelope, and said, "Merry Christmas, Grandpa." He didn't look up from the television, just held out a hand like she was delivering the mail, not offering a piece of herself. She moved back to the couch and sat beside me. Her face was still lit up, hopeful. She had no idea how cold the room had gotten. Then Frank picked up a large box from beneath the tree. It was wrapped in silver paper, topped with a red bow, almost too neatly. He held it out toward Kaya with a grunt. Her eyes widened. "For me?" He shrugged. "Says your name, doesn't it?" She looked at me first, like she needed permission. I nodded, even though something in my gut twisted. She scooted to the floor and pulled the box into her lap. Her small hands ran over the paper like it was sacred. I watched her savor every moment, the untaping of each edge, the careful unfolding. She wanted to remember it. Then the lid came off. She peered inside, and I saw it happen. The exact second she realized it was empty. Her face didn't crumple, not right away. Instead, her eyebrows pulled together in confusion. She reached in, as if something might be stuck at the bottom. She looked up at me, uncertain. There was nothing in the box. Nothing. Frank laughed, loudly this time. "What, you were expecting something real?" he scoffed, leaning back. "World doesn't give you gifts for just showing up, kid." Kaya blinked. Her hands froze. I couldn't move. Then Sandra, always waiting for a moment to cut deeper, chimed in from her corner of the couch. "Well, she is just like her mom, always expecting people to hand her things. It's no surprise." I felt it in my chest like a punch. I turned to her. "Sandra, don't." She raised a brow, smirking. "What? It's true." Kaya was silent now. The box still rested in her lap, flaps wide open, exposing the nothing inside. The room had turned on her, and I saw her realize it. I hated them. I hated them for making her feel small, for making her question her worth, for laughing like it was all a joke. I reached for her, but she didn't move. She just kept staring at the box like it might somehow fill itself if she waited long enough. Inside, I was screaming. Say something. Stand up, defend her. But I didn't want to make a scene, not in front of her. That's the thing about being in families like this. You learn to freeze when things get cruel. You learn to smile through clenched teeth. And I'd spent so many years doing just that, it almost felt normal. But it wasn't normal. Kaya was only 7. She didn't know how to put on a mask yet. She didn't know how to swallow that kind of pain. Then she looked up at Frank. Her voice was quiet, barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the room like a bell. "It's okay," she said. "I got you a gift too, Grandpa." And just like that, the whole room shifted. No one spoke, no one laughed. She reached into her coat pocket, and I realized something was about to happen that none of them would forget. I stared at her completely still as Kaya reached into her coat pocket. The room had gone silent. So quiet I could hear the faint creak of the old floorboard under the Christmas tree with every slight movement. My own breath felt too loud in my chest. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. It looked small in her hands, fragile even, like something that could be crumpled and dismissed without a second thought. But she held it like it mattered, like it meant something. I whispered, "Kaya, maybe not now." She turned to me, and there was something in her eyes I didn't recognize. Not sadness, not hurt, but calm, steady. She gave a little nod, the kind that said, "I have to do this." Then she turned to Frank. "I made this for you," she said. Frank didn't even lean forward. He just glanced at it with that same bored expression he always wore when someone dared ask him to feel something. "Oh yeah?" he muttered, sipping his drink. "You draw me a snowman or something?" There was sarcasm in his voice, the kind he always used when he wanted to make you feel small without raising it. But Kaya didn't flinch. She walked across the room and held it out to him with both hands. That's when I noticed her fingers were shaking. I knew that feeling. The way your hands betray you when your heart's thudding in your chest, when you're trying to be brave, even though every part of you wants to run. He took it from her like it meant nothing, slid it open with one hand while still holding his glass in the other. Then he looked down and stopped. I couldn't see what was on the paper from where I sat, but I saw his face. It didn't twist in confusion or irritation like I expected. Instead, his eyebrows drew together. He blinked once, then again. His jaw slackened just slightly, like he'd forgotten what he was doing. The entire room seemed to lean in. "What is it?" Sandra asked, impatient. He didn't answer. He just stared. Kaya stood there, hands clasped in front of her now, watching him quietly like she wasn't sure what came next either. I got up and crossed the room, slowly, almost afraid to break the moment. I stepped beside her and gently placed my hand on her back. She didn't look at me. She just kept her eyes on Frank, and he looked older than I'd ever seen him. Not angry, not smug, just still. He folded the paper carefully, deliberately, almost reverently, and placed it on the side table next to his chair. Then he stood up. No one knew what to say. No one moved. He walked out of the room without a word. The sound of his footsteps down the hallway was the only thing we could hear. He didn't slam the door, didn't shout, just left. I looked down at Kaya. Her voice was quiet when she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I knelt beside her, wrapped my arms around her, and whispered, "No, sweetheart. You did something brave." Sandra muttered something under her breath, but this time, I didn't care. Because I knew, whatever Kaya had drawn, whatever she had written, it got through to him in a way none of us ever could. She didn't fight back with anger. She didn't cry or scream or run. She gave him a gift, one that reminded him he was still human, even if he'd forgotten. And I think, just maybe, that scared him more than anything else. I didn't see my father for the rest of the day. He didn't return to the living room, didn't come back for dinner. Not even when my mother called out that dessert was ready, in that overly sweet tone she used when pretending everything was fine. Kaya didn't mention him again that evening. She played quietly with the ribbon from one of her other small gifts and helped me fold the wrapping paper scraps like it was any other night. But I could tell her mind was somewhere else. Every now and then her eyes would wander toward the hallway where Frank had disappeared, like she was waiting for something. But nothing happened. Not that day. We left early the next morning. I told them we had plans back in the city, but the truth was, I couldn't bear to spend another second pretending. Sandra didn't even get up to say goodbye. My mother handed me a foil-covered plate of leftover ham and told me to drive safe. No mention of what happened. No one asked how Kaya was doing, and that, somehow, hurt even more. The ride home was quiet. Kaya stared out the window, watching snow blur past the trees. I reached over and held her hand at one point. She squeezed back. I didn't bring up the drawing. I didn't want to make her explain something that was clearly so personal. I didn't want to pull apart whatever magic had lived in that moment. But I thought about it the whole drive home. What had she drawn that made my father, the man who once called me too soft for crying at a movie, turn pale and leave the room without a word? I found out 4 days later. It came in a small, unmarked box left on our porch. There was no return address, just Kaya's name written in careful block letters across the top. She opened it slowly, like she wasn't sure if it was safe to hope. Inside was a tiny music box, old-fashioned, wooden, hand-carved edges with little roses painted around the lid. It played "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" when she turned the crank. And there was a note. It was just one line, handwritten in a shaky, unfamiliar scrawl. To the bravest girl I know. Thank you for remembering her. No signature, but we didn't need one. Kaya clutched the box to her chest like it was made of gold. She didn't say anything at first. She just held it and smiled. I sat down next to her on the floor and finally asked, "Kaya, what did you draw for Grandpa?" She looked up at me and said, "It was a picture of him holding hands with Grandma, and me." Her voice was soft. I told him I hope he smiles again one day. because I remember how she made him laugh. My throat tightened. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because that was it. That was the part of him I'd forgotten even existed. The man who once smiled, once laughed. Before grief hardened him, before the years made him cruel, Kaya saw through all of that and gave him a piece of something he thought he'd lost forever. Not pity, not guilt, hope. She didn't try to fix him. She just reminded him that he used to be someone worth remembering, and in return, he gave her something too. Maybe not love, maybe not forgiveness, but a beginning. And sometimes, that's enough. The music box now sits on Kaya's nightstand. Every night before bed, she winds it up. Not always to listen. Sometimes she just likes to hold it, to feel its weight in her hands, to know it's there, the way a child might clutch a stuffed animal they've outgrown but still can't let go of. She hasn't said much about that day since, but every now and then she'll mention Grandma, someone she never even met, but speaks about like she's still here, like she's someone Kaya knows through the stories I've told and the quiet space she left behind, and maybe she does. Frank never called. He didn't send a follow-up message. No, I'm sorry. No explanations. That's not who he is. Maybe that's not who he'll ever be. But a week after the music box arrived, I got a letter. It wasn't addressed to Kaya. It was for me. It was short, 3 lines written in the same uneven handwriting. I was wrong. About you. She's a good kid. I hope you're doing okay. No name. But I knew. And for reasons I can't quite explain, I cried after reading it. Not because it made everything better, not because it fixed the years of silence or the way he used to look through me like I was a disappointment wearing a name tag, but because for once, it felt like he saw me. And more than that, he saw Kaya. He saw what I've always known, that she's special, that she has this way of peeling back the coldness in a room and showing people their own warmth, even when they don't deserve it. She's not loud. She doesn't demand attention, but she changes things. She changed him. Not completely, but enough. Enough to make a man who'd shut the door on the world open it just a crack. Enough to make someone who believed only in toughness and silence sit down and listen to the music from a little girl's drawing. People ask me sometimes why I went back that Christmas, why I let them near her, why I didn't protect her better. And the truth is, I thought I was. I thought shielding her from their coldness would be enough, that not talking about them, not visiting, not engaging, that it would protect her heart. But Kaya didn't need protection. She needed truth. She needed to meet them, to see the world for what it is, beautiful and cruel, broken and hopeful, all tangled together. And somehow, instead of getting lost in it, she decided to add her own light. She didn't need revenge. She didn't even want an apology. She just wanted to give a gift. And that gift, as simple as it was, did something I couldn't do in 30 years. It opened a door, not wide, not forever, but enough for a note to get through, enough for a song to play in the quiet, enough for a tired old man to remember a part of himself he thought was gone. Kaya reminded me of something that day, too, that sometimes kindness is the most radical act, that a whisper can carry more weight than a scream, and that when we choose love, even when it's hard, even when it's not returned, we create something no one can take away. A moment, a shift, a gift. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and comment. And maybe give someone in your life the gift of a second chance today. You never know what doors it might open.